The notification sound interrupted my focus as I tapped open the family group chat. My finger froze mid-scroll, a strange heat spreading from my chest to my fingertips. There they were, my sister Natalie, her daughter Olivia, my parents, cousins I hadn't seen in years, all wearing matching pink t-shirts with number sign Family First printed across the chest. Pink balloons filled the background of the recovery party, a party celebrating Olivia's successful surgery, a surgery I had paid $16,000 for, a party I hadn't been invited to. Welcome to Revenge with Lyra. She needs positive energy only. Okay, please don't come. That's what Natalie's text had said when I'd asked about visiting Olivia. Not thank you, not sorry, just that. After I'd emptied my savings account to save her daughter's life. My name is Paige. I'm 32, and this is the story of how I learned that sometimes the loudest statement is the sound of your absence. I've always been the fixer in my family, the calm one, the one they call when everything falls apart, the one who answers the phone at 2 a.m. when Natalie's voice cracks through sobs about how Olivia needs emergency surgery and insurance won't cover it. The one who drives straight to the bank, withdraws her entire emergency fund, and hands it over without hesitation, because family comes first. Always. That night, as I stared at those photos, the cake with "Our Miracle Girl" written in frosting, the banner thanking God for bringing them through this difficult time, my throat closed up. I had spent the previous week crying outside the ICU while Natalie was too emotionally fragile to be there. I had lied to my landlord about why my rent would be late. I had eaten ramen for every meal to stretch what little money I had left. And now I was negative energy. I didn't argue, didn't send a passive-aggressive text, didn't call my mother to complain. Instead, I booked a one-way ticket to a small coastal town using my emergency credit card that I'd been saving for absolute necessities, put my phone on airplane mode, and walked barefoot down an empty beach the next morning. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I breathed deeply and thought, let them notice the silence. They did notice 5 days later when the hospital called them about a suspended account. By then, I had turned my phone back on but kept it on silent, watching the notifications flood in without responding. It started with a voicemail from Natalie. "Hi, Paige, it's me. Just wondering if we can talk about the hospital thing." Not an apology, not a thank you. Just the hospital thing. As if my financial sacrifice was an inconvenience to discuss. I didn't respond. Then came the group text from my mother. "Sweetheart, can you give your sister a call? She's overwhelmed." Overwhelmed? Was she exhausted from choosing balloon colors while I negotiated a $16,000 payment plan? I stayed quiet, watching the notifications accumulate like falling dominoes. That's when the hospital billing department sent the family the second invoice. The first had been in my name, the second redirected to Natalie's account. Apparently, she'd insisted on being listed as the guardian for legal reasons. The new bill showed $1,650, due immediately, because my last transfer had been reversed. I'd called the hospital from the airport, my voice steady as I explained. I was emotionally manipulated into covering costs. I've withdrawn financial consent. Kindly remove my name from all future correspondence. They did. Now it was on Natalie, and she wasn't ready for that. 14 missed calls in 2 hours. 3 different family members with soft voices and vague shame. "Paige, it's not the time for drama. She's going through so much. Family doesn't keep score." But I did. I'd kept score for years. Every borrowed dollar never returned. Every weekend I'd given up to watch Olivia while Natalie needed me time. Every time I covered rent while they posted vacation photos. Now, my silence was louder than my presence had ever been. I hadn't disappeared out of anger. I disappeared to see who would notice the weight I'd been holding. And that weight was crashing down on them fast. By day 5, it wasn't just Natalie calling. It was her fiancé Brandon, then her best friend, then a message request from someone I didn't know. "Hi, Paige. I'm Rachel. I handle venue bookings for children's parties in Sunnydale. There's a little issue with a final payment." I stared at the message, my stomach tightening. A children's recovery party with a $2,300 catering tab, balloons, and a magician, all charged to the same credit card I'd canceled mid-flight. They'd booked it before even asking me. Just assumed I'd handle it. Now vendors were demanding payment. The venue threatened small claims court, and everyone realized the Bank of Page was closed. Then came the worst blow. A blog post from the hospital's charity partner showing a photo of Olivia in recovery, smiling bravely, with the caption, "Thanks to the incredible generosity of her aunt, this brave girl got a second chance at life." The post went viral in our community. Suddenly I was the center of attention, not for drama, but for quiet kindness. Local news reached out. My high school teacher sent flowers. My landlord wrote a thank you note with $100 off my rent. And Natalie? She was humiliated because in every comment section, people praised me, not her, not our parents. Me? She called again, this time sobbing. "You made me look like a bad mother." I replied, my voice calm and cold. "You did that all on your own." That's when she whispered words I'd never heard from her in 3 decades of sisterhood. "Please help me." I returned home 2 days later, having needed that brief escape to clear my head, though I still wasn't ready to engage with my family directly. After checking in with my landlord about the rent situation, I settled back into my apartment, still maintaining my distance from Natalie and my parents. But I wasn't done learning how far they'd go. What arrived in my mailbox next wasn't a thank you card, it was a summons. I held the envelope under my kitchen light, my heart pounding against my ribs. Paige Sutton, defendant. Case number 8429 CV. Breach of verbal contract filed by Natalie Sutton. She was taking legal action against me for emotional damages and financial sabotage, claiming I intentionally canceled payments after agreeing to cover them. She said I caused public embarrassment, said Olivia's health was at risk because of me. My hands trembled, not from fear but from something deeper. This was what it had always been, manipulation wrapped in designer clothing. I called a lawyer. A pro bono women's legal clinic handled my first consultation, which I found through an online search for affordable legal aid. They read the claim and laughed out loud. This will get thrown out faster than junk mail. Still, I prepared. I gathered texts, voicemails, the invoice trail, bank receipts, and that viral hospital post. 3 weeks after receiving the summons, we had our day in court. At the hearing, Natalie arrived in pearls with crocodile tears. She sobbed about betrayal, broken promises, and sisterhood. The judge, an older black woman with silver hair and a steel gaze, listened quietly. Then she turned to me. "Miss Sutton, do you have anything to say?" I stood, not angry, just clear. I didn't abandon my niece. I paid for her life-saving care. What I won't pay for ever again is being used. The judge nodded once, sharply. Case dismissed. Plaintiff is advised to reassess her definition of family. Natalie burst into tears again, but no one followed her out this time. Not even our mom. Outside the courthouse, the sun warmed my face. I had a voicemail from the hospital, a nurse I'd never met. "Paige, I don't know what you did, but Olivia's recovery is ahead of schedule. She keeps asking when she'll see you again." That was the only courtroom victory I needed. But 4 days after court, my mother showed up on my doorstep. Not crying, not angry, just tired. A silk scarf draped around her shoulders like a peace flag. "I don't want to fight," she said. "I just want to talk." I didn't step aside. I waited. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded paper, a copy of the GoFundMe she'd secretly created for Olivia's recovery. One that had raised over $12,000 using my name, my story, and my photo without my consent. "I didn't mean for it to go viral," she mumbled, "but people cared. It helped." I stared at her. "You raised money using me and didn't tell me." She flinched, then tried to justify. "It was for Olivia. You said you didn't want to help anymore." "I said I wouldn't be used anymore," I cut in. "There's a difference." She begged me not to report it. "Do you want the world to think we're scammers?" I took the paper from her hand, folded it slowly, then said, "You already did that part." She cried. the kind of crying meant to soften someone, but I didn't soften. I closed the door and called the GoFundMe support line, reported the misuse, attached screenshots and proof. The campaign was shut down within hours, donations frozen and redirected to the hospital account in Olivia's name. That night, Olivia messaged me. "Auntie P, Mom's crying again. But I told her, I'm proud of you. You're the only one who shows up for real." I sat with that, with the quiet, with the ache, with the unexpected bloom of peace. But I wasn't finished yet because someone else had also used that campaign, and I was about to find out who. It started with an email. Subject line: "Urgent. GoFundMe press inquiry." Inside was a note from a journalist who'd been tipped off by someone at the hospital about unusual fundraising activity and had seen the now-deleted fundraiser. They were doing a feature on viral donation scams and had questions, including why the campaign had linked to a local real estate business as its withdrawal account. Wait, what? I read it twice, then opened the cached fundraiser page that the journalist had helpfully attached, scrolled to the fine print, and there it was. The connected withdrawal account didn't say my mother's name. It said Westview Realty LLC, Brandon's company. My hands shook as I opened my banking app and cross-referenced the wire I'd sent to the hospital. I hadn't noticed then, but the account number wasn't the one I had on file for billing. They had rerouted the funds through manipulation and back-end changes. They had likely paid part of the bill, enough to keep me quiet, but siphoned the rest. It wasn't about Olivia anymore. It was about misusing compassion for profit. And suddenly, the party I hadn't been invited to, the unspoken cold shoulders, it all made sense. I wasn't bad energy. I was inconvenient because people who pay attention notice where money flows. That night, I wrote a letter, not to Natalie, not to Brandon, but to the local district attorney's office, attaching all the evidence. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was the kind that builds before a storm. By morning, that silence had cracked. My mother was at my door. No calls, no texts, just her standing there with a brittle smile you wear when you know the truth is catching up. She didn't ask to come in. She walked straight to my kitchen, poured herself a glass of water, and sat like she still owned the place. "I heard," she said, voice thin, "about the letter." I didn't answer. "It's not what you think. Brandon made decisions, but we were trying to protect you. You're always so sensitive." "How did you know about the letter?" I asked, suddenly suspicious. She looked away. "The DA's office called Brandon this morning. They're taking this seriously." I almost laughed. "Sensitive? I funded your daughter's surgery. I kept your lights on for 3 years, and you still labeled me bad energy." She stood, the mask slipping. "You're going to ruin us." "No," I said quietly. "You did that when you turned compassion into a con." She opened her mouth, but just then a knock at the door. I didn't have to guess who it was. A woman in a gray blazer stood there, badge visible, notepad ready. Behind her, another officer. "Are you Miss Sutton?" I nodded. "We'd like to ask you a few questions regarding an open financial misconduct case. We have a report of fraudulent fundraising, misuse of healthcare funds, and unauthorized rerouting of bank transactions." I stepped aside, my mother's face drained of color. "I didn't," she began, but her voice was already too late. "They didn't come to accuse me. They came because I was the witness, the whistleblower. I watched as she sat down on my couch, trembling, answering questions she never thought would be asked. That night, I lit a candle by my window, not for revenge, but for justice that finally remembered my name. The newspaper never printed my name, just a quiet blur buried between weather forecasts and sports scores. Local family under investigation for medical fund misappropriation, charges pending. But I clipped it anyway, taped it to the inside of my kitchen cabinet. Not for pride, but for clarity. 2 months later, the investigation concluded with Brandon pleading guilty to misappropriation of funds. He received a suspended sentence, probation, and was ordered to pay full restitution. Natalie filed for divorce shortly after, finally seeing what I'd seen all along. My mother, while not formally charged, lost her standing in the community she'd worked so hard to impress. Natalie sent a voice note a week after the sentencing. It started with sobbing, then begging, then bargaining. She said the party was never meant to exclude me, that I misunderstood everything. That family is messy, but love is real. I didn't respond, not because I didn't care, but because sometimes healing means choosing silence over reopening wounds for someone else's comfort. The hospital called again, this time to tell me the debt was cleared. A donor, anonymous, had paid the remaining $4,000. I later learned through Olivia that it was her father, Kyle, who had remained distant from the family drama but stepped in quietly to help his daughter. No message, no credit, just grace. And so I did what felt right. I took the money I'd saved for next month's rent and booked a tiny cabin by the lake. Just me, a journal, and an old paperback I hadn't touched in years. On the first morning there, I brewed my own coffee, walked outside barefoot, let the light fall across my face like forgiveness. No texts, no guilt, no labels like the outsider. Just me, the woman who used to beg for a seat at the table, now building her own table beneath a sky too wide to be owned. 6 months after the court case, Olivia came to live with me part-time, while Natalie figured out her life post-divorce. Our relationship has grown stronger than ever, built on honesty instead of obligation. Kyle and I now coordinate Olivia's care together, having formed a respectful co-parenting relationship that puts her needs first. As the wind kissed the pine trees and silence wrapped around me like a soft coat, I whispered, "You'll never steal my peace again." They say healing is loud, but mine, it arrived in the form of stillness. Before you go, here's a quick bonus for sticking around. If you love learning and growing like I do, you need to try audiobooks. I've got an exclusive deal with Audible. Your first month is completely free. That's access to over 500,000 titles, zero cost to you. All the details are waiting in the description. Don't miss this one.